It's the Hero Show. Welcome to the Hero Show, everybody. Starring the irrepressible Andrew Bernstein and the indefatigable John Hersey. I am Andrew Bernstein, and you are indubitably John Hersey. How you doing today, John?
I am stellar and happy to be talking about the man who might one day get humans to Mars. Also, I am John Hersey. You're Andrew Bernstein, and I want to introduce another colleague of ours, the Objective Standard Institute's resident space and technology expert, Thomas Walker. Welcome to the show, Thomas.
Hi, John.
Thomas,
Yeah, I mean,
hi.
hi, Andy.
Welcome to the Hero
Expert
Show,
might be
Thomas.
pushing it. Expert might be pushing it a little. I'm more of an enthusiast, but I hopefully will bring a bit more of technical and industry background to the show for this one.
Well, it's a relative term, so given my absolute non-expertise in all things space and technology, I think you fairly deserve that title at Objective Standard Institute. Maybe not at SpaceX or Tesla, but here you get it.
Yeah, we don't want you designing rockets for SpaceX, Tom. But describing the achievements of that great company, I think you certainly could do. All right, so let's get started, guys. The topic for today is Elon Musk, who was born in 1971. So he just I think in June. So he just turned there he is, just turned 50 about 6 months ago. Now, right at the outset, I want to say I think Elon Musk is a very mixed case. I'm going to have a lot of criticisms to direct against him, but SpaceX is a glorious company, and that's what my interest in certainly in praising Elon Musk as a hero. So, but we've never. John, and Tom, you've probably seen some of the episodes. We've never shied away from criticizing the moral flaws of our heroes. We've done a lot of that, as a matter of fact. But uh, I think with Elon Musk, the good outweighs the bad. Let's put it that way. So, well, you want to get started at the beginning with his childhood and background and education and all those good things?
Yeah, let's do it. But another just sort of introductory note here. I think it'd be wise for us just to remind ourselves of what a hero is. And Andy, you wrote the book on this, so you dive in too. But, on balance, a hero is someone that does things that promote human life, that just make freedom and flourishing better. And so we've talked about, like you said, mixed heroes. We talked about Jefferson, William Wilberforce, in the Society for the Suppression of Vice. So,
Yeah,
but
just the name makes my hair stand on end, John. Society for the Suppression of Vice. God,
it's a pretty bad one. And
yeah,
Elon
it's
has
true.
some
But
pretty bad, yeah, there it is. Heroes, Legends, Champions. Definitely recommend that. And
oh, thank
you,
thank you.
so yeah, maybe you just want to remind us of the definition that you give of heroes in that book.
Yeah, well, let me hold it up again to the camera. This is Heroes, Legends, Champions. I'm a lifelong hero worshiper, so a lifetime of hero worship and thinking and study of heroes went into this book. But heroes, the qualities let's say the epic heroes that I started out with in the book. One, they have prowess that exceeds that of every man and every woman. That prowess, that ability might be intellectual, it might be physical, it might be some combination of the two. Two, like you said, John, they put that prowess in service of life promoting goals. They cure diseases. They like we discussed Ayn Rand. They write great novels and revolutionize the field of philosophy. They found free countries. They defend free countries against tyrants and so on and so forth. And in doing so, in reaching these great striving for these great life promoting goals, they very often face resistance and opposition and antagonism. They stand up to it. They're dauntless against concerted opposition I'm just a hero worshiper. I'm not a hero. I may cower in front of the mighty British Empire. I wouldn't be George Washington with his ragtag army, fighting against the most powerful empire in the world. But heroes they're undismayed. They're undaunted. They stand up against severe antagonism, and and they carry on in pursuit of life promoting goals. And I think Elon Musk, mixed case though he is, in regards to SpaceX, I think qualifies, as a hero, and some of his other accomplishments as well. But SpaceX in particular, I think he qualifies as a hero.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why we've aptly titled today's episode Elon Musk and Man's Odyssey to Mars. So, yeah, 1971, born in Pretoria, South Africa. Precocious child from a very young age. I remember reading Ashley Vance's biography of Elon Musk several years ago and was blown away by just several things. He sat down and read the encyclopedia cover to cover, not obviously all in one sitting, but he read the encyclopedia. How many kids do that? He was absolutely absorbed in books, much like many of the great heroes that we talked about on this podcast. One that comes to my mind always is Benjamin Franklin. And by the age of 10, he got interested in video games and computers. And he picked up a computer manual, and he taught himself computer programming at age 10. And by 12, he'd already come up with his own video game called Blastar, which he was able to sell for about $500 at the age of 12, which is just pretty incredible, and obviously speaks to his future entrepreneurial streak. So,
and in 1983, $500 had greater purchasing power than it does today.
Yeah, in South Africa, nonetheless. He grew up in a pretty rough place, South Africa, Pretoria, where he was. Lots of bullying in school. He was bullied. He's always sort of been this sort of geeky guy, even though now he's sort of like the almost Iron Man, Tony Stark kind of character. He was beaten up. He was actually hospitalized at one point, thrown down a flight of stairs and hospitalized. But he said recently, and I love this, he said that, a lot of people today are sensitive to words and they have their feelings hurt by words. And he said, if you get punched in the face, then you realize that actually words don't mean a whole lot.
You're right.
So
that's a good point.
He decides pretty young that he's going to come to the U.S. He's going to avoid the draft in South Africa, but he knows that he's got a better shot of getting into the U.S. via Canada. His mother was born in Canada, so had citizenship there, and he goes to Canada, goes to Saskatchewan, which is that's above North Dakota and Montana. It's farming country, and that's what he did. He got some odd jobs working on a farm, I believe with a cousin of his, chopping wood, taking care of animals, things like that. Not the sort of thing you'd envision for a future rocket scientist, but that was him nonetheless, putting in the hard work, and got into the University of Queens when he was 19. Spent a couple of years at Queens studying and already really began to distinguish himself. And then after a couple of years, he was able to get into the University of Pennsylvania here in the US. He came to school, big nerd, got along with a lot of the other nerds, but didn't have a huge social group. Studied, of all things, he got his bachelor's in economics from the Wharton School and another bachelor's in physics. So dual major, knocked both out of the park. He was an extremely good student. And one of the interesting things that Vance talks about in the biography is that, there are already signs of Musk's future ventures. He was writing papers on electrolytic capacitors. He actually got an internship in 1994, I believe, to go work at Pinnacle Research Group or Institute in Palo Alto. And there he learned a lot about electrolytic capacitors, which in some ways outstrip batteries in their ability to both store and provide power. So he wrote a business plan in college for one of his business courses that got him like a 98 or a 99. And several of those, actually. I mean, he wrote he wrote several papers relating to his future endeavors. So it's just really interesting. If anyone wants to really dive into Elon's bio, the Ashley Vance biography has got a lot of great information on his educational years.
Sounds good. Now, guys, Musk made his fortune originally as a co-founder of PayPal. Is that right?
Yeah, sort of. Actually, he founded a couple companies before that. So he founded Zip2. So after college, he went to California. He was actually enrolled to study materials science at Stanford to do a PhD there. He quit after 2 days. He decided he wanted to be part of the internet revolution, and he tried to get a job at Netscape, but they did not respond to his many applications. So he said, if I'm going to be a part of this thing, then I'm just going to have to start my own company. So he started a company called Zip2. It was sort of a precursor to Google Maps. It was like a yellow pages for businesses. They had contracts with the New York Times and with the Chicago Tribune, and he was able to sell that company eventually. His stake was like what was it, $22 million, I believe. Sold his stake in that company. Actually, the whole company was bought by Compaq. And then he went and founded a company called X.com, which is not a porn site, actually. It was a
Yeah,
it was one of the
you got me all excited, John. I know you disappointed me. I was ready to go look it up.
well,
All right.
Elon, he
All right.
rebought that domain in 2017, and we don't know what he'll do with it in the future. So maybe he won't disappoint you.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Okay. Good.
this
You
was a
never know.
precursor to PayPal.
You never know. He's an imaginative kind of guy.
He likes to have an
He's
X.
very, and he's,
That's
yeah,
right.
he attempted to make the Tesla Model spell sex, but that didn't work out because Ford owned the rights to the Model E. Yeah, so he started X.com, which was one of the first federally insured online banks, and their competitor was Confinity, which owned PayPal. And at some point, the companies merged. There was Peter Thiel was one of the founders at Confinity, and there was some there was some headbutting there. You got a couple of the smartest internet pioneers in the world trying to work together. They had differences of opinion about which software to use. At one point, Musk became CEO, then Thiel became CEO, and Musk was basically forced out. But in 2002, this is
Hold on a
3
second,
years
John.
after.
Musk wanted to use Word, right? Microsoft Word rather than Linux. Is that
Well,
right?
Microsoft. He wanted to
Okay.
use Microsoft and not Linux. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Not Word specifically, but Microsoft software. I
Okay.
don't know exactly which one. They do make
Okay.
a lot of other more business products. And this was so 3 years. He founded X.com in 1999, and 3 years later, the merged whatever the company that came out of this, which came to be known as PayPal, was bought by eBay for $1.5 million. And Musk actually was the largest shareholder. He had something like 11.7%. And this is how he made $100 million. So this was the seed money for SpaceX. And
and for
his
Tesla
entry
for
into
that.
space. Yep.
And before we get into SpaceX, which the real basis of Musk's heroism, I think, which he founded in 2002, we should say a few things about Tesla. Tom, since you're the expert here, I've heard a lot of negative things about the possibility of electric cars. So what's your take on? I saw a guy in Scandinavia the other day blow up his Tesla. Did you see it? He dynamited it because the replacement battery costs like $22,000 or something insane like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've driven one. A friend of mine actually lent me one for a number of months because he moved to London and couldn't drive anymore in London. So I got to drive one, which was a wonderful experience. Like, they are fantastic cars as a driving experience. They're built on a Mercedes platform, so that's probably part of why they're so nice to drive around in. But electric cars per se, there's a couple of issues. Firstly, the batteries themselves rely on so many resources to construct. They're very expensive to construct. They're very hard to dispose of. And there's actually been an issue in France recently with a huge order of electric cars that were bought for Paris. And they've all now been dumped in a parking lot because they can't dispose of the batteries safely. So they're all just sitting there abandoned in this yard. And so, yeah, compared to like, if you're trying to find greener solutions to, alternatives to internal combustion engines, there are a lot of other technologies like hydrogen fuel cells or just converting those engines to run on biofuels and things like that are probably cheaper and more viable. Problem is, we've had governments pushing electric cars as the primary solution and putting in all this charging infrastructure everywhere, which distorts the market. It makes it easier to use them. So that seems to be the direction we're going in now. There's some research on hydrogen still happening, but it's really the complexity and the fact you need to get cobalt and all these very expensive, hard to extract resources to build the batteries, and then disposing of them at the end of its life cycle is extremely difficult to do safely.
Before we get into Musk's kissing up to the government for money, one thing I wonder is how much fossil fuels does it take to even produce these kind of batteries?
I don't have a statistic offhand. I say I'm more of the spaceflight guy than the electric car guy, but you have to mine cobalt out of the ground in open cast mines. That's not terribly environmentally friendly. And then you've got the entire manufacturing process. Obviously, it depends if the truck's doing the digging and the moving around of things are fossil fuel powered or not. But yeah, firstly, the most obvious thing with electric cars is that electricity has to come from somewhere. So how green it is depends on what you've plugged it into to charge it in the first place. If you're getting that from a coal-fired power station, the only real saving there is that you're not carting the weight of the engine around with you as you're driving. Otherwise, you're still using fossil fuels to power it, just indirectly. Even if it's coming from green engine, as you say, there's that construction cost in the first place.
Well, thanks for that, Tom. Now, how much money has Musk? Musk not only has received a lot of government money for Tesla, he solicited it in a number of cases. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, it's mostly through grants. He's come out a lot recently saying that Tesla has a position of not accepting government grants, which seems contradictory. I think what he's trying to draw a distinction there is that he's accepted either contracts to provide something or certain exemptions like tax exemptions and things. So I think he's trying to drive a difference between the government paying you a grant and giving you some kind of exemption or a particular sort of favorable treatment, which is still cronyism. It's still market distortion. It's just, if the government isn't directly just awarding you grants, you're still taking advantage of government force to secure a dominant market position. That's definitely what Tesla's done. In 2015 it was said that Tesla and his other company SolarCity that produces solar power, neither of them has ever actually made a profit. They're subsisting entirely on grants and favors. So it's interesting that in the last few years he seems to have turned around and come out against those sorts of subsidies. When Tesla in particular, SpaceX is different, and I'll get onto that, but Tesla in particular has survived a lot on grants that are only there for the purpose of trying to drive forward renewable energy.
Right. So that's my main criticism of Elon Musk. John, you have any other criticisms of Musk that you want to chime in with?
Yeah. I think a big one. So recently he's, when did he start? So he started Neuralink in 2016, I believe, and OpenAI, a nonprofit group, in 2015. And both organizations and even Tesla to a degree are interested in what's called advanced general intelligence, is a branch of artificial intelligence. And recently, Musk has said that he thinks that government ought to have an agency that oversees this sector of the economy. And so he was asked more generally, Elon Musk was asked more generally about his thoughts on the role for government. And he gave kind of a mushy answer. I think he's on the right track. And clearly, he's one of the most brilliant people on the planet when it comes to principles of physics and engineering. But there are certain principles of government and society, and we've just been talking about one of them, But the underlying principle that I don't think Musk fully grasps, and maybe someday we can Neuralink this into his head, is the basic principle of individual rights. This is the principle upon which civil society is founded and flourishes. And so, although it's true, as Musk says, that we do need, there is a role for government, of course, and that is to protect people from, the unscrupulous, the few unscrupulous business people that are out there, or the many. I won't weigh in on the number of them, but his idea is that we need government agencies to oversee these things and to regulate them. And what the problem is that we don't have enough garbage collection on the back end to get rid of laws that just don't work out. And I think that actually this is there's a better engineering method that we can apply to this, Elon. What we can do is we can have a better principle on the front end, and we can ask of any law or regulation, does this violate individual rights? And this solves, by the way, the problem, the practical issue that Musk is interested, rightly so, in solving. We do need government to protect people. In a free market, and in America historically, that is the government's only legitimate job, is to protect people's individual rights. And when companies do violate those rights, so he asks rhetorically, well, you don't think we should have a world without the FAA and the FDA? Like, he sort of dismisses this idea that we could get along without these regulatory agencies. But in fact, if the government did its one job of protecting individual rights, then we wouldn't need the types of regulations that consider businesses guilty until proven innocent, the very sorts of regulations for which he left California and fled to Texas. So, if I could make just a general point about Elon, that I think this is a big point against him, although I do think he's developing, I think he's on the right track. I think that he needs a better grasp of this basic principle of engineering a society, which is the principle of individual rights.
I agree with you, John. I think we should take up a collection and buy him a copy of Atlas Shrugged, and send it to him special delivery, with a strong recommendation from the Hero Show to read it. But it does sound like Elon Musk is moving in the right direction. Even the move from California to Texas. They say actions speak louder than words. He fled from the regulation, heavily regulated state to a much less regulated state. So he seems to be moving in the right direction. But anyhow, should we get to the real basis of his heroism? The reason why?
Can I ask John? Just before that, I wanted to just ask John, because you brought up Neuralink and his AI research, and then went into the point about individual rights from that. But I'm just curious what the connection is between Neuralink and the rights point, because that's a technology which depends how it's used as to whether or not it's a rights violation. Like, it could be something that gives us awesome opportunities to create.
Well, John wants to Neuralink it into Musk's skull. That's not a violation of Musk's rights or anything, right?
No, actually, that's the kind of thing that I think Musk is worried about, and legitimately so. So, advanced general intelligence. If AIs become smarter than humans, then horrible things on the level of the worst sci-fi movie you've ever seen could happen. I mean, it's a possibility, and I think that we ought to be thinking and worried about this sort of thing. The question is, what do we do about that? Do we prohibit? Do we put up a bunch of red tape in advance? Do we get a government agency of unelected bureaucrats that don't stand for election, that don't need to worry about whether or not their policies work or are popular? Do we want that? Is that the sort of thing that we want to protect us against the possibilities against advanced general intelligence? Or do we want a rights respecting approach to the development of advanced general intelligence? So with that sort of thing, if we were to have a company that developed advanced general intelligence and did violate someone's rights, perhaps they hacked into your brain and added ideas that you didn't want there. I don't know if this is even a possibility, but maybe someday it will be. then we need a means of dealing with that. But the means is at least in the abstract, it's already there. It's, well, you have the right to act on your own judgment, uh, so long as you don't violate the equal rights of other people. And as soon as you do, you've crossed that line, and we need a means of dealing with that. Perhaps we need more specific laws when it comes to how the principle of individual rights applies in the realm of advanced general intelligence. But I don't think we need a regulatory body whose job it is to tie the hands of the people that will create this technology. So you
I
see tech CEOs.
agree with you. Certainly agree with you, John.
Mhm.
I'll tell you this: if they're gonna Neuralink into my skull the ideas of Elizabeth Warren, I'm gonna rebel against that, just like Elon Musk did. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another reason for which we have to talk about why he's a hero. But
Yeah, he's
I
moving in the
presume
right
at this point,
direction.
everyone's really, yeah,
He's
politically,
moving in the
Elon
right
Musk is
direction.
moving in the right direction.
But
I
so
believe so.
Tom, I do too. He founded SpaceX in 2002. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Space Explorations Technology, Space Exploration Technologies. That's the full name of the company.
yeah, that's right.
There
Yeah,
we go.
and
There we go.
and I don't know if you guys had a kind of a timeline planned out, because what we've got up on the screen there is the Falcon Heavy, which is the launch vehicle that SpaceX is using now, and that's a phenomenal machine. But do you want me to give a bit of a background to how we got to having that, like the process that SpaceX went through?
Yeah,
Because
Yeah.
please.
that
Go ahead. Go ahead, Tom.
I say that really starts with the Falcon 1, and this is 2006 to 2008. So this is only a couple years after this company has even been founded, and they've already got their prototype built. And there are some companies that take decades. Sierra Nevada with their Dream Chaser taking 20 years to build a prototype. SpaceX had it done in 4, and the Falcon 1, sorry, is really small. It's like one of those side boosters on that rocket, but about half the size. It's this tiny little single stage rocket, and its sole purpose is really to be the first completely privately designed vehicle to make it to orbit. And they have 3 test launches, and all 3 of them fail. And they only had budget for 3 test launches. But after the 3rd failure, Elon Musk says, "No, I want to make this work. I'm going to make this work." He goes around raising yet more money, and it's just his determination. He spoke about this a lot in interviews, that pushes for that 4th test flight to happen, even though all the suggestions were that the engines don't work, the guidance systems don't work, things keep going wrong. That 4th test launch was a spectacular success, and got the vehicle into orbit. That was actually the last time the Falcon 1 flew, because as soon as they achieved that, the goal changed to let's build it bigger. Let's build something that can actually lift serious payloads into orbit. And that's where the original Falcon 9 came from. There was originally going to be a Falcon 5 in between. You decided to skip that and just go straight to the big one. So the Falcon 9 is designed to be a launcher capable both of putting heavy payloads into Earth orbit and launching payloads out on an escape trajectory, we call it, if you want to send something beyond the Earth out towards the Moon and Mars or anywhere else. So that was really the Falcon 9's purpose, but it was always intended to be something that could recapture the power of the Saturn V from the Apollo missions. Something, because since the end of the Apollo program, the US and really the world at large has not had anything comparable in power to the Apollo moon rockets. There's nothing capable of, until now, there's not been anything capable of launching that kind of mass into that kind of trajectory. So even though when the Falcon 9 started launching, the original launcher was really a way of making money in order to fund the development of the bigger one. So that could launch satellites on a commercial basis and start reducing the cost of launches that way, whilst also development on the bigger one happened. And to cut a long story short, the Falcon Heavy, which we've got up on the screen there, is more powerful than anything else that the US has in its arsenal, more powerful than the Delta IV or the Atlas V, which are its main competitors. It can launch 50,000 pounds to Earth orbit and send payloads really anywhere in the solar system. He's got a bigger one in development, which I can talk about later. But the key other thing to mention is that because it's a commercial company, it's not a government company. Reducing costs is so important to SpaceX. And the main way they've done that is by making the rocket reusable, so that you're not throwing it away every time you launch it. It all comes down, it's all reused, it all goes up again. And the technologies they've invented to make that possible.
Let me jump in here for a second, Tom. So the engineers and scientists at SpaceX figured out how to land safely land their rockets, right? So they could reuse them, which seems to me would be an enormous cut in cost, in space, space exploration. And they land them on ocean, on ships now, right? In the Atlantic, is that right?
Yeah, with wonderful names like "Tell Me You Don't Love Me" or something like that. But
they
have these ocean-going platforms, which the precision involved is just mind-bending. I mean, there's never been a fully reusable rocket until the Falcon 9. Like the space shuttle that NASA developed in the 70s, which has so much wrong with it, I couldn't even begin to get into. But that was half reusable. Like the plane part was reusable and the boosters were, but the fuel tank was still thrown away, and you had to rebuild it every time before you flew it again. The boosters come off, they parachute back, and then they start thrusting to land vertically on a column on a rocket thrust. So if you just try to imagine balancing a chair on one leg, like you're balancing this thing on a single point of thrust and then aiming it for a specific point in the ocean or on the ground and bringing it back. And they did it took them 10 attempts to get this right.
Tiny platform in the vastness of the sea. It's pretty impressive.
If you watch the footage, they put cameras on everything now, and you can actually see it, looking down from 20 miles in the air and just finding that specific point and landing vertically on it. It's a phenomenal thing to be able to do, and it's massively reduced launch costs. We have a more powerful and cheaper to operate rocket in 5 years than NASA gave us in 50. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, that's a tremendous achievement of SpaceX. And you're right, Tom. It's as a private company, they need to be able to cut costs. They can't just soak the taxpayers for more money. Although NASA, remember NASA was always complaining that the government didn't soak the taxpayers enough, for NASA projects. Well, Musk hasn't been kissing up to the government for funds for SpaceX like he did for Tesla. Is that right?
Well, I mean, it's a different kind of government.
He's got a lot of government contracts, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's not like he's not receiving grants for SpaceX. It's not, obviously it's not an environmental thing. The thing creates a ton of smoke. He's providing services to NASA. So the development of not really of Falcon rocket so much, but of the Dragon spacecraft that sits on the top of it for sending people and cargo to the space station and back. The development of that was accelerated because he got funding through NASA's Commercial Orbital Transport Program, COTS program. And he's one of a couple of different private companies that, when they retired the space shuttle, NASA started developing its own system called Orion, which is still, 10 years later, not flown yet. But at the same time, they realized, if you want to get a good group of American spacecraft that can go to the space station and back, the private sector is going to do a better job of it. So they've actually got 3 or 4 different companies now developing different systems, but SpaceX was the first through the gate. So they got some funding to develop the craft from that, and now they contract to provide services, and they're the only American company currently. It's either that or Russia to take astronauts and cargo to and from. Well, there's a couple of other cargo ships, but to take astronauts to or from, it's either the Dragon from SpaceX or the Soyuz from Russia. Getting into bed with Russia has a lot of problems and it's very expensive. So, it's actually freed America from that reliance on Russian launch vehicles. But yeah, so they're providing a service to NASA, and that was the point of the COTS funding, was to give NASA a vehicle that can take. So it's really like when a company builds something for the military, they're building and providing a service for a government agency.
Right. But you remind me of something, Tom. Musk originally wanted to buy rockets from the Russians, right? And then he thought the Russian cost was prohibitive, so he decided that SpaceX is going to design and build its own rockets. Was that the way it went?
He was going to buy the engines from one of the Russian launchers. I think it was the Proton. There's actually another American private space company did that. The Antares rocket used Russian engines, and then they had a catastrophic failure, which is the polite way of saying it blew up on the pad on one of their earlier launches. So after that, they stopped using the Russian engines and started using a different kind. So it's probably a good thing that SpaceX didn't go in that direction, because it seems that that's not the safest thing to do. But yeah, that was, and the Russians absolutely fleece NASA for rides on Soyuz, to the point now that the Russians are putting astronauts on Dragon as well. Like the Russians are paying SpaceX, even though they have their own launch system. which is just
That's funny. Now, a big part of the purpose of SpaceX is to land human beings on Mars and ultimately to colonize Mars. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, that's a vision that Elon Musk and I have shared for a long time. That's one of the reasons I really like him. Is he has a vision for the kind of
Yeah, he
world he
does.
wants to live
Vision,
in. And he
vision
said,
is good, Tom. He is What are his flaws? He is a visionary entrepreneur. That's what I love about him.
well, he has. I mean, lots of us have visions, but he makes his vision happen. He turns the world into the world he wants to live in, and that's the thing I admire most. It's not about making the world better for everyone. It's about creating the kind of world that he wants to see, and he really goes about doing that, just indomitably. And that's I think that's what Tesla is as well. I think he wanted to have a world where we had green cars that are amazing, and he wants to have all this AI technology. But clearly, space is his true passion, and he's already revolutionized it so much, and that's going to have so many benefits down the line. But yeah, getting in his words, making humans a multiplanetary species
I
would
love it.
just
And within 30 years, didn't he say within 30 years?
yeah, I mean, I think if anything, he'll do it quicker than he said he would. I mean, this is the thing. NASA always, whenever NASA announces something, their dates are always no earlier than. It's always, we'll launch this no earlier than December 2029 or something.
Well,
with
correct
Elon
me
Musk,
if I'm
it's like,
wrong.
we'll do it
Correct me if I'm
as soon
wrong.
as we can.
Isn't his latest prediction to have human beings on Mars by 2026? I mean, not to
2029 is what I heard,
colonize, but
yeah, I
okay.
wouldn't be
All right.
surprised if he brings it back. I mean, there's a lot of issues with Mars colonization in terms of radiation exposure and things like that. But
Oh yeah, but I mean, to land people on Mars would be a first step. Colonization would
yeah.
come later.
Well, and this is
Right?
the naysayers will raise all these problems, but you solve these problems. That's what
Yeah.
entrepreneurs do. Is you find solutions to these sorts of things. So I'm pretty
Obstacles
sure
are just things. Obstacles are just things to be overcome, said the great British hero Ernest Shackleton. We've quoted him endlessly on the Hero Show. John, let me say something before you jump in. I want to say something about Carl Sagan, the great astronomer who we had an episode on. Now, in Cosmos, Carl Sagan's great TV show, and then the book, he's talking about 100 years ago, Mars fascinated people, right? They thought the canals showed intelligent design. They thought there was intelligent life on Mars and everything. And Carl Sagan relates the story, that I think it was in Britain, as a matter of fact, some journalist, some newspaper man, sent a telegram to a leading astronomer. Professor so and so, is there intelligent life on Mars? Please answer in 500 words. And the astronomer responded, nobody knows, nobody knows, nobody knows, repeated 250 times. Well, today we know, we've landed probes on Mars, and we know there's no intelligent life there. But I don't know if there's any kind of life, but there's certainly no intelligent life here. But Carl Sagan concluded that section of Cosmos where he talked about, this was 1980, right, or 1980s. He talked about human beings traveling to Mars and eventually colonizing Mars. And he concluded that section by saying, the Martians will be us. And, that's a great line. And that's what Elon, Carl Sagan, the astronomer, theoretician. And you're right, Tom, here's Elon Musk, the entrepreneur, the man of practical affairs, putting that theory into practice. That's what we love about Elon Musk.
Yeah, I mean, some people like Carl Sagan, like Elon Musk, like Robert Zubrin, they have this vision and they understand that human beings solve these problems. Some people don't. And just a small aside is, when George Stephenson built the world's first passenger steam engine in 1825, I think, the people at the time said, "Oh, we can't go at 27 miles an hour. You won't be able to breathe at that speed." And there's always been naysayers of every technology that comes along. So people who say now that we won't be able to live on Mars or fly to Mars because of the radiation exposure or the lack of gravity or any of these sorts of issues, we will solve all of these problems, and somebody will laugh in 100 years' time at the idea that.
Well, the fact that there's little or no atmosphere, on Mars, or certainly not breathable atmosphere, certainly poses a life-threatening problem. But that's not to say that it's insoluble. Right? I mean,
no.
These
It's probably one of the simple problems to solve.
Well, there's for a long time there's been this theory that human beings can terraform, might be able to terraform Mars and and
Yeah.
create an Earth-like atmosphere on Mars. The science involved goes way over my head. Do you know anything about that, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of cool idea. It's basically you deliberately pollute the planet. You
I
intentionally
gotta,
set off.
gotta love that.
Yeah, yeah. You intentionally set off a runaway greenhouse effect by pumping as much greenhouse gas into the atmosphere as you can to try and thicken it up and trap more solar heat. So that's the really basic idea of terraforming. Musk also has ideas about restarting the magnetic field to protect against radiation. That I've not got into yet, so I'm not totally sure what his thinking is there. But in terms of thickening up the atmosphere, it's about trying to retain as much solar heat as you can to drive the temperature up and get more of the water vapor out of the rocks. So it's kind of doing what we're already doing on Earth in a much bigger scale.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because correct me if I'm wrong. Mars, it was 48 million miles from Earth, 50 million miles, something like that.
Where it is in its orbit. So when they're
okay.
It's about 20
All right.
million. When they're on opposite sides of the sun, it's
okay. I get it, but I was just saying it's millions of miles further away from the sun than is the Earth. So it's got to be much colder. It's got to be much colder on the surface of Mars than it
it's
is
only a
on
little
Earth.
colder. It's only a little colder because of the distance. It's really the lack of atmosphere that causes all the heat to escape. Right. So that's why it's so much. If it had a thick atmosphere like Earth does, it would be not much different from Earth. It's not that much further out from the sun than Earth is compared to Jupiter, Saturn, that are much further out.
Okay. I didn't know that. That's interesting. So, John, did you want to chime in here because there were things I wanted to get to about the benefits here.
Well, we could just point out a few firsts. And obviously SpaceX has many. I don't even think we can hit them all. Thomas probably knows the dates better than I do, but what was it? 2008, first private liquid fuel rocket into orbit. That's what got them the NASA contract. 2012, was it that they were the first private spacecraft to dock with the ISS. And then just 2020, we got to see, a lot of us got to see on TV, the first private crewed ship dock at the ISS. So yeah, the naysayers are out there. And one of the things I love about Musk is that he doesn't engage in what is fashionably called nowadays motivated reasoning or rationalization. And this is the tendency to hear the naysayers or to hear any sort of criticism and to sort of have this knee-jerk reaction of, oh, well, they're wrong, and I'm going to prove they're wrong, and I'm going to manifest grit. And basically, my determination will change the facts of reality. He understands that that's not the case. When he started SpaceX, he gave it something like a 10% chance of actually working out. And he was clear about this to investors. He wasn't telling them, oh, you're going to make a bunch of money. So, what I like about Musk in this respect is that he's clear-eyed about the odds, but what keeps him going is the fact that the things that he wants to accomplish are not impossible. They're possible. And because they're within the realm of possibility, he's going to try. Because as Tom said, he wants to fashion the sort of reality that he has in mind. And for those interested in Musk generally, I'd say go read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think this actually gives us much of the image that Musk has in mind to actually bring to fruition.
Yeah, and you're right. Just let me jump in for a second. You're right, Sean. He's clear-eyed. I think this is accurate. That's from Elon Musk. If I'm wrong, correct me, guys. But he has said people are going to die, going to Mars. This is dangerous. This is not for the faint of heart. This is for the really adventurous souls. The same kind of people like, I don't think Musk said this. I'm adding this, but like Magellan, he and his crew, they didn't know what they were going to find, when they tried to circumnavigate the globe. And of course, Magellan himself was killed in the Philippines, and God knows how many of his crew died, and a handful made it back to Spain. This is dangerous. Musk doesn't try to candy coat it from what I've seen. People are going to die. in this. It takes really adventurous people. What amazes me is even knowing how dangerous space flight is and space exploration is, there are still people who are going to do it. I'm not going to be one of them. I'm going to sit on the sidelines and applaud them. But, there are people who have real courage. They're going to go out there and land on Mars and colonize Mars, and a lot of them are going to die. But in the end, my guess is that they'll triumph, and human beings will be, as Tom said before, quoting Musk. What was it? Interplanetary species or multiplanetary species?
Yeah, multiplanetary species. Yeah, I mean, I think fewer people will die than would have done if it had been a government project, judging by the space shuttle safety record and how they kept flying the shuttle when they knew there were problems with it until the accidents happened. But no, I was just going to say, John, you're absolutely right. He's achieved so many firsts. My wife and I have been running Innovation Celebration, a podcast all about science and technology, for about 6 months, and we've already covered 3 of his breakthroughs in just that time. We had the first completely private crewed orbital space flight a couple of months ago. He's pushing, and people will scoff at the tourism aspect of it, which I think is a wonderful thing to be able. Not only does that drive so much more money and public exposure into this, but it's providing the impetus to drive that technology forward, and it's creating something that one day I think we'll all be able to enjoy. So it's just wonderful.
I asked my daughter Penny, who's going to be 19 soon. I can't believe it. Well, she's a great shopper, which is a girl's favorite sport.
That's a great skill.
Although, yes, yeah, she plays other sports as well, volleyball notably. I asked her if she'll be able to go to Mars in her lifetime. I said, Penny, you want to go to Mars? She said no. I said, why not? She said, there's no malls. So I said, well, give them time. Eventually,
you should tell her.
Girls got to have
tell her that playing volleyball on Mars would be amazing because it's half gravity. You can punch it so much further.
Well, the leaping ability to get up over the net in half gravity, right? I mean, it would be prodigious. But I want to point out seriously. That's right. They got to rename that now because J.K. Rowling has been descended upon by the woke mob, right?
Oh, we should do a hero show on J.K. Rowling then.
Yes, we should. Yes, and we will. We will. I just wanted to point out some of the benefits here, of space exploration. First of all, the scientific knowledge that will be gained. How many scientists? Scientists. We discussed that, John, when we did the show on Darwin. Being a great scientist sometimes is dangerous. You're out there, in the jungles. You're looking for flora and fauna and all kinds of venomous snakes and stuff. And scientists go out, and risk their lives, looking for various kinds of specimens and examining, whatever it is that they're studying. How many scientists are going to risk their lives to go to Mars? I assume we're going to colonize the moon first, and then use the moon as a base. You want to go straight to Mars? Well, whatever. It's dangerous. You're on the moon. You're on the Mars. Many scientists are gonna risk their lives, and I think scientific knowledge will be greatly advanced by space exploration. 2, the colonization aspect of it. You think about this. Of course, we're human beings. We're going to bring our philosophy wherever we go. And, if we colonize Mars, you could still have Muslims. I was going to say Marxists, Nazis, Jews, Christians, Muslims, whatever. You can still have all these irrational philosophies. But at the same time, colonization can lead to a fresh start for human beings and for freedom loving human beings, like the New World did on Earth. And so that's another great benefit. A third, you guys have read Robert Heinlein's famous novel, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, right? I mean, it's a famous.
I need to read him. I haven't yet.
Yeah, Heinlein's one of the great heroes of sci-fi, right? And there's a guy we could do a hero show episode on also. But that's a long time since I read that book. But if I remember correctly, the moon was used as a mining operation. It was a mining base for raw materials. Now it's going to be prohibitively expensive at first to try and mine stuff on on the moon, never mind Mars, and ship it back to Earth. But in time, who knows what kind of advances can be made, and then the natural resources that all these uninhabited planets, open up for us. It'd actually be better if they were inhabited. That is, if inhabited by rational beings, and we could engage in interplanetary free trade, because that would be just as beneficial to all parties, as Adam Smith pointed out a long time ago. International free trade is, but they're not inhabited. We have to do it ourselves. But the production cost, the transportation cost, in time, the whole history of capitalism shows us, if capitalism survives, those costs, those costs will come down. And the enormous amount of raw materials, then the natural resources that are available to us. But what I think is, to me, the most impressive and greatest benefit of space exploration and colonization is just the rekindling of the heroic spirit of exploration. Henry the Navigator, and Magellan, and Columbus, and all these great heroes. Space, the final frontier. Uh, I don't think it's literally true. I think exploring the oceans and the ocean floor is also another great frontier for us. But space exploration, just to rekindle that heroic spirit of exploration, that man, the hero. I think this is. I think that's the greatest benefit of all. From what Elon Musk is doing. So there's a lot of benefits, and I got a lot I can say in answer to all the naysayers, but I don't want to monopolize the show. So why don't you guys jump in with your thoughts and comments?
Well,
Yeah, no,
one
definitely.
question I think that definitely is in my mind, and I think probably a lot of listeners' minds as well, is, well, whose role is it to rekindle that spirit? And if you look at American history, the space programs obviously started with government. And the fact that, okay, well, now government is funding private companies to do a lot of the technological heavy lifting, the engineering heavy lifting. This is definitely a step in the right direction. Government, again, to go back to government's role, is to protect individual rights. It's not the government's job to advance the cause of science. That is the job of scientists, right? And currently, we have a lot of scientists that work for the government. And I think what we need is an even greater shift in the direction that Musk is pushing. And, Thomas mentioned earlier, there's Blue Origin and other private space companies that are working on interplanetary travel and getting into orbit. So I agree with you. This is definitely a tremendous pro of space exploration. And the more we can get this into the hands of private companies that are motivated to make insanely great products and provide incredible experiences to paying customers, that's how we get the iPod of space, that is available to everybody. It starts prohibitively expensive, and over time, as more and more people buy into this new product or service, that price comes way, way down, and this just becomes one of the things that we take for granted as an everyday experience. It's no longer this unachievable thing with a million problems we don't know how to solve.
I mean, there is a slight caveat to that. I mean, it's certainly what you're describing is absolutely true. And the Falcon 9 is like a Tesla, and the space shuttle is like a station wagon strapped to a firework. But there's a slight sense in which government does need to be involved in space, and that's the security and defense aspect of it. There is a legitimate role for government in spaceflight, because we have the Russians and the Chinese testing satellite-to-satellite weapons and things like so
Yeah,
they have a legitimate role, being there to keep people like Elon Musk safe when they're doing legitimate business in space. So
you're absolutely right, Tom. And some of Elon Musk's government contracts are for the Department of Defense, aren't they? I think he's done.
yeah, he's launched a number of.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, we did a hero show a few weeks ago on the U.S. Navy and the heroes of Midway, who turned the tide of the war in the Pacific. And Billy Mitchell had proved before that he who controls the skies controls the seas, because air power will knock out the great battleships of any navy. And today, I think it's he who controls space controls the skies. So you're absolutely right. You can I think killer satellites are feasible and everything. And if space if spa- you know if the bad guys in the communist regime in China are really bad guys, Putin is a bad guy. The Iranians are bad guys. I don't know if they have the technology to develop space-based weapons, but your ideology is what makes you dangerous primarily. So who knows what they might develop in the future? There are bad guys in the world, and absolutely right. The military of the free countries have to be able to control space in order to defend freedom on Earth. So you're absolutely right. There's one practical reason, for space exploration. But I want to get in because before we run out of time, I hear and from intelligent people, from people who I respect as generally rational, the negatives about Elon Musk and SpaceX and colonization of Mars, and they'll tell me, and you've heard this, we have plenty of problems here on Earth. Why do we want to go to Mars? you know, and, my response first of all, with in Elon Musk's case, a private company, it's his money, it's his time and money. He could do with it as he will. It's his inalienable right as an individual. But in addition to that, the major problems on Earth are caused by irrational philosophy. So a lot of people who are semi-socialists think, well, maybe Elizabeth Warren would agree with this. We got to take the money from Elon Musk and we'll put it into more welfare programs or whatever. Well, that philosophy is a big part of why there's problems on Earth. Elon Musk's money, we could steal it all at Bezos and all these guys and put it into the programs that these socialists want to put it into. It's not going to solve any problems on Earth. It's not primarily a financial problem. It's a philosophic problem. And I tell people there's two things we need to resolve problems on Earth. One, we need a culture of reason. We need to fall in love with reason. We need to glorify the human mind, just like Ayn Rand showed us in Atlas Shrugged and Julian Simon in the Ultimate Resource. We need to fall in love with human mind. We need a culture of reason, and two, we need a politics of individual rights. Then, the original American founding Enlightenment principles, political principle of individual rights, like you were saying, John, and then you could stand back and watch the torrent of innovations and new developments and advances, new ways to grow food, new housing to build new medicines to cure diseases. Then we'll see, an enormous advance in human life and the military capacity then to defend ourselves against the bad guys. That's what we need to solve problems on Earth. Stealing Elon Musk's money to put it into social welfare programs is not going to solve any problems. Or zero.
Yeah,
So,
there was a great poll on Twitter of who would you trust more with the $11 billion that Elon Musk is going to pay in tax, the government or him, and it's if people care about poverty in Africa, the Starlink program is going to transform that. Elon Musk has launched this 2,000 of these miniature satellites to bring internet to every corner of the world, and that's going to predominantly benefit places like Africa and Southeast Asia, where people are cut off from society and aren't able to do what we can do and to communicate internationally and get jobs this way and get work this way, and that's going to open up opportunities for those people. We've got companies like Axiom Space is designed
the most entrepreneurial people in the poorest countries can greatly benefit from that if the local governments permit entrepreneurship.
Absolutely,
and don't stifle it.
But he's going to do so much more for human welfare than Elizabeth Warren ever could. And and then also the other thing is that space research delivers benefits back home, and even just the little bit that the government's has done that. It's delivered new medical treatments, new technologies. Axiom Space is now designing a research center, a private research center in orbit that companies can rent modules in. And people are saying, this is a waste of money. Why do it? But that's going to deliver so many technological benefits down the line when you've got private companies doing research in orbit. The things you discover about medical technologies and things like that working in a zero gravity environment, it's it's like you say, it's the moral fundamentals that really make the difference, but the practical consequences of having the right ideas is just phenomenal. And once the more private operations we have in space, the more benefits we'll see back on Earth as well.
Yeah, and a big problem of colonizing Mars is going to be growing crops, unless you want to ship all your food in from Earth. In the book and film The Martian, the Matt Damon character was living on potatoes, right? But you want to grow crops on Mars. That may involve whole new methods of whole new advances in agricultural science and agricultural technology. They say, necessity is the mother of invention. I wouldn't, I, I'd be surprised if that didn't happen, and that would enable us at the same time to revolutionize agriculture and growing of crops on Earth. So I think you're absolutely right, Tom. There's enormous advances enormous benefits that are going to come from colonizing Mars and from space exploration in general, despite the dangers. Oh, one other thing I mentioned. Speaking of Carl Sagan, SETI. We can't talk about space exploration without discussing SETI, right? The search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, I always thought, when they say be careful what you wish for, right, or be careful what you look for. I just hope, Tom and John, that we meet the American aliens and not the German aliens when we're out there. But but I'm sorry. I didn't mean to knock Germany. Germany's German culture has produced a lot of advances, but it's been slightly militaristic at times. The Germans have been slightly militaristic at times. Would you say?
If they're rational enough to invent something that can get them here across light years and light years, then I hope they'll be rational enough to be the right kind of people.
I've often thought that. I've often thought that too. But we could also remember, the Nazis took over a very advanced, scientifically, technologically, and industrial advanced society. So it's not impossible that there might be bad guys. Although I tend to think you're right that with that kind of advanced culture, they would be more rational and peaceable. But SETI, yeah, the space exploration, of course, will advance that search. Yeah, would that be an amazing day? I don't think I'll live to see it, unfortunately, but amazing day when we make contact with intelligent life and advanced intelligent life from other planets. That would just be an amazing day in Earth history.
I love the sequence at the end of Star Trek First Contact where the Vulcan ship lands and you have that moment of humans becoming part of a galaxy, not just of their own world. But I might not live to see that, but it would be a wonderful thing. And people like Elon Musk will make it more.
Yeah, absolutely right, and I agree with you. It's only a guess, but educated guess that aliens that advanced would be rational and peaceful.
Yeah.
Well, just to be the odd man out, because that's my favorite position. You guys were talking about this like it's an inevitability, and it's only a matter of time, and you might not live to see it, but it will happen. So, as of now, dear listener, there's no evidence of advanced life out there in the universe, but perhaps maybe we'll find it. But for now, I'd recommend maybe Andy would recommend Heinlein. I was turned on to some great science fiction by my friend Timothy Sandifer. It's the Gaia series by John Varley. So for now, if you want, other intelligent life forms, go find it in some great science fiction books.
Well, you're right, John, that it is pure speculation. Whether there's intelligent life on Mars, or we know there isn't there. But is there intelligent life on other planets? But it's also speculation. Is there intelligent life on Earth? Because no, we know there's intelligent life on Earth. The question is there rational life on Earth? And the answer is sometimes. But this was a great show, I think, and I think we did justice to Elon Musk. We criticized him for his flaws. We celebrated him for his heroic achievements and his visionary entrepreneurship. So I want to wish everybody out there to have a more heroic day. I want to salute Elon Musk and all these great heroes. Salute you guys. I'd say have a Have a more heroic day. Everybody lead a more heroic life for all of us. And we will be back and see you next week on the Hero Show. Have a great day, everybody.
Happy New Year.